friend of mine who went to Germany as a refugee. She's an atheist lesbian. She got so frustrated with speaking out about this that at one point she said to me, I cannot wait to see Germany ruled by Sharia. I cannot wait to see all these fuckers get exactly what they want. These are the people that they love and that they support and that they stand behind. Good. I'd love to see your country become a Sharia state. And I was just like, oh my God, like you are like, that was like shocking to me. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Yasmine Mohammed podcast. Today, my guest is Richardis. Richardis is a German feminist who became an activist after experiencing stalking at the hands of an abusive man who kept using his status as a Muslim migrant to try and reverse victim and offender. She also has had to witness a friend of hers fall victim to a Muslim grooming gang as an underage girl. Richardis, thank you so much for joining me here today and for talking to me about these very difficult topics.
Hello, thank you for having me.
So we have to acknowledge, first of all, that you're joining me to speak up against this danger to you from this stalker. And you've altered your appearance and you've changed your name, of course, because you need to protect yourself from this abusive man. But I have to ask you a little bit about that because you are a German woman in Germany. And so we like to live in a world where we hope that it would be safe for German women to speak their truth, but you don't feel that you're safe, you need to alter your appearance. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I do want to make clear the main reason is that very concrete stalker that I'll talk about more. Because I'll go into how the stalking proceeded, and unfortunately it's very relentless. And so sometimes he's silent for a year, he pops back up again. And so I never know if he's watching my online activity. And I am now, and I have been for some years, an outspoken feminist, and I've grown a bit of a profile in the German feminist scene. And I'm scared if he saw this interview specifically that he would feel antagonized and attacked, and it would feed into all these conspiracy theories that I'm trying to ruin his life when he's done his best to ruin mine. But it's not just that, it's definitely also other German people. This is going to surprise nobody. There is a section of the left wing that doesn't want any debate on this issue, on misogyny in Islam. And I live in a university town, so it's very liberal. And even just a couple of streets away from me are some of the ultra left. That's where they meet, that's where they hang out, that's where a lot of them live. And I know someone who knows someone who's like in that Antifa scene and who says like, some of these people are well-intentioned and some of them do sensible things, but some have a pretty crazy drug culture. They're looking for a fight. They make lists of people to go after. And some of these are legit neo-Nazis, but as we know, they're quite liberal with that term, and you get tarred with that pretty easily. And I know for sure I will say some things in this interview that might get me tarred that way. And I just want to be able to walk across campus and not worry that I'll be bullied, harassed, or worse. And I know other women who've been targeted that way. One of my friends, she used to date a guy who is bald, right? And they just spun this story that he's a skinhead neo-Nazi, which is complete, can I swear?
Yes, of course.
Complete bullshit. So if those kinds of people make up those kinds of stories, it's so easy for them to invent something about me being like, they don't care who you really are. They're just looking for an enemy. And those kind of very black and white thinking people, they do scare me. And I'm saying nothing new when I say that they have this very simplified vision where everyone who's oppressed in any way is on team oppressed people. And gets along well and fights together, and there are no disagreements, and there's no oppression inside that group, or and and so to them, as if I'm a feminist, but I don't have unconditional support for every version of Islam. So okay, maybe they would also oppose some of the very overtly violent types, but the slightly more hidden or casual misogyny, or even just acknowledging that there is a systematic problem, I know they would take issue and they'd see me as some kind of traitor. So that's why I'm trying to be anonymous.
That is incredibly heartbreaking and disgusting, and I'm really sad that you have to experience that you have to feel that way. I know that, it's very different for me coming from the background that I come from. It's just so, it's almost like it's normalized that the woman is victim blamed, that the man is the one who is supported, that airing the dirty laundry about any kind of misogyny in Islam is not acceptable. And if you do, then you are the bad guy, not the misogyny itself, but you for speaking up about it. And I can't tell you how heartbreaking it is to know that that's the reality of women in the free Western world right now, that you're experiencing shadows of the same garbage. Like, it's just infuriating to me. Have you had the support of the authorities, like with this abusive stalker? Did you find that the authorities were acting in a similar manner as to these left-wing nuts that you were describing?
I did eventually go to the authorities, but that's kind of late in the story. So it took me a very, very long time to report. So
okay, let's get to the story then. Tell us your experience with this Muslim migrant who was stalking you.
Yeah, so I met a young man who was just a year older at a music festival, and I call him Imad. That's just not his real name, but I needed to give him some kind of name, so let's call him Imad. And he was half Moroccan and half another ethnicity. It's just a very unusual combination of ethnicities, so I don't want to name that because his name is actually so unusual. If you Google him, there's nobody else with the same name. So I'll just say he's half Moroccan and half another nation that's not close to North Africa. And we just started chatting, and I thought he was very worldly, and he had traveled to so many places, and he had this multicultural background. And that country that he was from, I had lived there in the past, so we had that connection where I used to be there, and he was the odd one out there because he was brown skinned, and most people in that country are not. And I was also a real outsider and very lonely when I lived there, and I didn't speak the language well. And so we really connected, and I thought, oh, this is a worldly man. He's as a music festival. He must be, okay, I understood he's a Muslim, like he did say that quite openly early on, but I was like, oh, this is one of the liberal ones, and we can connect. And that time at the music festival, I didn't notice anything. It was just, I thought this was like, oh, we'll see, it'll be some kind of summer romance. But then things started going downhill pretty fast. So we didn't live in the same city. So I went to visit him in his city. And there were, like in hindsight, red flags, though I didn't clock it at the time. And so one of the first things he said to me was, since I've seen you, have you cheated on me? As in, because I kissed him at the music festival, the assumption was I'm just kissing men left and right. I'm just, excuse me, whoring around. Like in retrospective, that's how I explain his thinking. I'm just an easy white girl. And he also didn't want me to meet his friends, which I thought was so strange. Like, why can't I meet his friends? Like, would they all want a piece? I mean, I'm speculating. I don't know that for certain, but that's kind of the sense I got once I had the full picture of what kind of person this was. And it'll surprise nobody that he was very pushy and he wanted sexual things that I didn't want at that stage. And it's the kind of violence that I'm not even sure German law has deep flaws when it comes to sexual violence. For a very long time, you had to say overtly no or resist so that it would count as assault. But if the man just says, oh, come on, please do it, please do it, please do it, please do it, please do it 100 times, and you get worn down, even though you don't want to do it, that probably wouldn't count. So that was kind of his approach. And the whole time I was there, I was just fighting him off. And something like that had not happened to me before. I wasn't completely oblivious to violence against girls. A lot of my friends had actually been assaulted and even raped. But I was under this illusion that he was, again, worldly and he wouldn't do this. And also, it's hard to admit that you chose badly. And like you blame yourself and that kind of thing. So I couldn't admit it. And also, I was in a foreign city that I couldn't easily leave. I wasn't close to anybody. I was in a different part of Germany. And so when I left, I was really upset about it. I wondered if I was asexual. So I just looked for the problem with myself, not with him. I even went to my doctor and they prescribed me an estrogen cream in case it was like an endocrine problem. So no, I wasn't able to really tell people what was really going on. I thought the problem was me. But yeah, I didn't break up yet. So this is not unusual. Like, I've had many friends where the same thing happened, but when you're in it, and he kept spinning a narrative about how he was really in love with me, of course. And the next time I saw him, like, I didn't actually like this. This actually put me off further, but I think he thought it was going to impress me that he actually started talking about getting married at the mosque. He said I should convert and get married at the mosque. And I would make, like, this is true love and this is how he expresses it. And don't I know what I'm missing as an atheist? And I don't remember all the details. I think my mind also blocked out some things, which is not unusual. So I only spent like 2 weekends with this man. But yeah, he was really upset. I still didn't want to go all the way with him. And I had forgotten like shampoo or deodorant the second time I went to meet him. And so we went and bought it, and I didn't have cash, and I don't know, it didn't accept my card, so he paid for it in cash. And when we went home, he said, like, can we have sex now? And I said, no, I don't want to. That's too soon for me. And then he said, but I paid for your deodorant or shampoo. I don't remember what it was. And I said, I'm not a prostitute. So,
I mean,
like,
can I just say, like, what kind of prostitute is he gonna get to exchange like shampoo or deodorant with too? Like, this is just beyond. Like, he's just such a weird, creepy person. Anyway, sorry,
yeah.
please continue.
And thankfully I did clock that. And it was again a situation where I didn't feel I could immediately leave. But it like he just kept being creepy, and eventually there was a part of me that just started saying, we just got to get out of here. So I don't know, he was cooking or something, and I packed my things, but I was like, I can't just go. I have to tell him I'm leaving. I have to be decent and tell him I'm going. And he took my luggage from me and said, you're not leaving. This is not acceptable. This is what my mom used to threaten to do to my dad. And this traumatized me as a little boy, and you're repeating my trauma.
Oh.
And he cried and guilt-tripped me to stay another night. And he succeeded. And I didn't feel I could call the police, or there were other people this was a shared apartment. There were other people living, and I didn't feel I could tell them. And it started this rhetoric of like, he didn't say like call the police. He didn't suggest it, but in the back of my mind, I was thinking, is this bad enough? Should I call the police? Maybe I shouldn't. I don't want to get him into trouble, which is so typical. Like, now I've met so many victims. It's so typical that we think we're in active danger and we're still thinking about him and his future.
Yeah. And you're
But
also thinking about what has he done that are people going to believe me? Because your whole body is just like alarm bells are going off, and your intuition is telling you, get out of here. This is dangerous. But is that concrete enough for you to explain to somebody for them to believe you? Like you're thinking that as well. Like, unless he comes at you with a knife or something where people are going to
yeah,
actually, yeah, they don't understand that, they don't know what you know, which is that your whole body is screaming out to you that this is dangerous for you. And then the emotional manipulation and the tactics of crying and using his mom and his childhood trauma and whatever, like just this that's just him playing on your empathy. So as women, that works with us, right? And he knows that.
yeah, exactly. But thankfully, the moment I was on the train back home, like a very, very solid voice in me said, I'm never seeing this man again. Never, ever, ever. So thank Goddess for that voice because I did never go back. But he didn't let me go, as you can imagine. I mean, yeah, he became my stalker. And it took a lot of different shapes. So just endless emails and telephone calls at all times of day. And this affected my whole family. I was still living at home at the time. Because I like had a smartphone super late, and I don't know, I don't know why, but he had my family home number, the landline, and I think that's the right term, landline. But
Mhm.
yeah, he called at all hours of the day, like sometimes upwards of 10 times per day, and we had his number saved so like nobody would answer because all the stalking hotlines tell you don't answer. You
Mhm.
don't give him anything, don't reply to anything, don't try to explain, don't try to like pacify him. Anything you give a person like that is just going to encourage them to do more. And he started spinning this narrative in his emails. So I did read the emails. I felt like I had to anticipate what he might do. He started spinning a narrative about my parents being racist against him as a brown man and as a Muslim, which is complete bullshit again. Like
Did your parents even meet him?
um before I went to visit him the first time, my mom did insist on talking to him on the phone just once to get a sense because she's like, you're 19, you can do what you want, but I just want to get a general idea. But you can't tell if someone's a predator on the phone. So
Mhm.
I don't
Mhm.
blame my parents. They
No,
and I'm
no,
I'm
I'm
not
just wondering. Of course
yeah.
not. Yeah.
Um, but yeah. Um, so this was a complete fantasy of his. Nobody had ever said anything about him being a Muslim. Nobody. And um in fact, my parents, because they didn't know enough about stalking at the time, said, let's just invite him to tea and talk it out. So that's what we did. He came over, he traveled to my town, he came to tea, and everyone was super polite, but I was like in shock. But I still hadn't been able to tell my family what had really happened. Um, and so thankfully, a friend was there with me, and most of the time we just hid in my room, and I didn't want to see him. But and of course, it was all for naught. He didn't accept anything my parents said. They were just saying like, it's nothing against you. She just doesn't want to date you anymore. Maybe you can be friends. We'll see. But just there's no hard feelings. But this didn't work at all. And um, he did show up in front of the house several times, and he would send red roses. And so I hate red roses because that's what he would send. He sent jewelry and gifts, essentially trying to buy me again. Like this is it's like just the worst possible method, but he just kept escalating in his assumption. Like he held on to that theory that this was some kind of racism, and my parents had manipulated me to break up with him. And he did at one point in some communication with my mom say that he had been talking to people at the mosque and describing what was happening, and they all thought it was very strange too. Like me and my family were behaving strange, and maybe I was being abused by my family or something like that. So, and he, one time unfortunately, I did pick up the phone and he said to me, I really want to beat you, but I'm a good person. I would never beat a woman.
Wow.
So that kind of threat where you, as you're saying it, you're taking it back and unfortunately, some of that manipulation did work. Like I did like question, had I done something? I did still feel sorry for him, and I did like I like to draw a lot, and I found some pictures from that time, and I was drawing pictures that were like a symbolic representation of, you know, star-crossed lovers hurting each other, and like some part of me was like, yeah, we hurt each other, right? Like, and everyone else just kept saying this man's mentally ill, he's mentally ill, and probably he is to some degree, but I had one friend who gave me a good book about intimate partner violence. It's Why Does He Do That by Lundy Bancroft. I can't recommend that enough. And I found it really important for me that the author says most of these men are not ill. They might be, but the decisive factor is their value system. They're misogynists. There are other mentally ill people who don't hurt others, including men who are frustrated, men who are lonely, who don't do this. It's that they don't see you as a full human being and you're punching back to them. So I did eventually go to the police. Like when he started showing up at the door, that was scary enough to go to the police. And thankfully, they took it very seriously. And they were relatively sensitive. They let me talk to a woman rather than a man, like recording my statement. And then they sent him a letter in bureaucratic German, and his German wasn't good. I don't know if it's good now, but it wasn't good then. And he thought they're going to arrest me and deport me. And then, so it got worse. So the police tried to help, but they made it worse at first, like not intentionally, but they did. And I just want to say for context, he was acting like he would be deported into a war zone, but that he has a nationality in a stable first world country. So he was acting like the most oppressed, downtrodden. He's not. Like he has a university degree, he has options, he has an education, yes, he would be a minority in that country, and I believe him that he faced racism as a brown-skinned boy among a lot of people who are not brown-skinned. I believe that. But it's not like he would get assaulted or murdered living in that country. And yeah, it really just went on for years with the telephone terror. And I moved away from my hometown in part to just get far away. I moved to just as far away from all of it as I could. And I still had this paranoia, which I'm sure many others find familiar, where you think you see him in a crowd. It's like, there's no way he can know you're in that city, but you think he's in the crowd somewhere. And I had nightmares for a very long time. And then I kept thinking, oh, it's over. But actually, my family spent some time hiding from me that he was still calling because they didn't want me to be worried. But he kept this up like for 6-7 years, like an insane amount of time.
Wow.
And then only about a year ago, I had the misfortune that we were in Berlin at the same time by accident, and he found me on a dating app. And that's when I had to see his face again. And he had he like swiped me so that I had to see him again just to say hello again. And that's the last time there was any like contact attempt, but that just resurfaced the paranoia. And the good news is that it really solidified my feminism, and it like I kind of made lemonade out of lemons. And I work for a feminist NGO now, and I think it helps me a bit understand other women's stories because I've experienced dissociation and self-blame and still caring about the abuser when he really doesn't deserve it. So when I see that in other women, I'm like, yeah, I get it. So, but it's still scary because I would like to do more public work, and I'm thinking about maybe I'd want to do more on this issue. But if he saw it, like again, if he saw this video, I'm sure he'd say, there she is trying to defame me to the world. Like, and I don't know for sure what he's capable of. He didn't beat me, but my gut feeling says he's capable of that and worse. So, yeah, that's what kept me stifled for so long.
So after they sent that letter, did they not do anything else? I mean, for this to continue for 6 to 7 years, did you re, yeah, go ahead, reopen the case?
This is where German law comes in, where technically what he was doing wasn't a crime. It is now. Back then, it's not illegal to send emails or do phone calls or be in like stand on someone's street. It was kind of, the police was like, if he's there with a knife, then we can do something. And like one of my best friends is a law student. I still don't fully understand German law. It's so complicated. Like again, like lots of victims don't know their rights. Like you have to be a law student to even understand this stuff. They couldn't do much more other than warn him that if he comes close, I didn't get like a full-on protective order, but I also had health issues that did start before this whole ordeal. So I was also busy with my health issues and my studies and the new life in the town where I just wanted it to be over.
Yeah.
And so I didn't go to the police and like, can you keep doing something about this? But I do worry that he's doing it to someone else, of course. But even if he got sentenced for something, it'd be like a year. And then he's out there with the biggest vendetta against me possible. So I am worried about other victims and myself, but it's almost more dangerous to pursue the police route, or it can be. I just don't know what's going to happen.
You know, you're telling me all this stuff about German law is really terrifying to me because Germany was, notorious for, I think it was New Year's 2016, where there were those basically rape gangs. In Arabic, it's called taharrush, where these men were just like circling women as if they were, hyenas circling a zebra or something, and then just sexually assaulting her right there in the middle of street parties going on, And so, and the stories are endless in Germany of, these undocumented migrants harassing women, sexually assaulting women. And for you to tell me that the laws that protect women are so convoluted that you'd have to be a law student to understand it, like this is a really terrifying combination of information that you're sharing with us right now.
Yeah. And I did like so both when Me Too happened and when when that New Year's Eve mass assault happened, I wasn't surprised. Everyone was shocked, but I was like, makes sense. And I'll go into that later, that I had friends who experienced much worse. So my story is like lightweight in comparison. I don't want to play like comparison Olympics, but on paper it is. And I did recently read a book about it. Unfortunately, it's only available in German, called Shock by Alice Schwarzer. She's one of Germany's most famous feminists, and she's like in her 80s. She's been around the whole time. She's never been shy to touch the conservative issues. She was one of the first to talk about abortion, prostitution, and Islam. Like she's been on that issue, Islamization, radicalization, working with women in those countries locally as a journalist, like speaking to other women on the ground. And she's been defamed from here to hell for it and called a right-winger. But anyway, in that book, they did describe a lot of the events, and I can't do all of it justice, but like we do know in retrospective that there was suppression about reporting this to the public. So for several days, it was like lots of rumors, and Alice Schwarz's, her magazine did report on it. Like a couple of days, as soon as they had info, they reported about it. But the major outlets waited a really long time, and they left so much room for speculation, which of course the right wing moves right in and takes the narrative. And I have encountered a lot of people in Germany who've moved to the right, and it's about this specific issue. Including like some women and feminists, and I can understand it, especially if their lives have been touched personally, where they're like, we just want no migrants, everyone out. And I'm not well versed enough in all of this to know what we should actually be doing, but it starts with not suppressing the information and having a conversation, because it's definitely not an isolated incident. And I did look up some statistics in regards to organized group sexual violence, and I can just read some of them out right now if that's fitting.
Sure, yeah.
So these are most recent, like, so 2003, 2002, there were around 800 so-called gang rapes countrywide reported in Germany. And all of these statistics, you can critique them because, like, what is a gang rape? This does include incidents where there's only technically one rapist, but he has two accomplices who help lure the victim or hold her there. But still, anyway, it is still group organized violence, even if only one commits the act. But in this is the highest number we've had in 13 years. And again, we can debate that. Have women do they feel like they can speak about it more? Like, every single one of these points, somebody can come and attack. And that's, I'm sure you all know this. That's a favorite tactic of people who don't want to talk. They say these stats are imperfect. So we're just going to say, like, that means there's no problem. And until you have perfect stats, we won't debate this. And that just lets women down, because you will not find a single study or numbers about violence against women that don't have flaws. They all do.
Well, they're always going to try and find flaws anyway. I mean, I think in Sweden, the incidences of rape went up like 800% or something like that. Okay, they're flawed. It was only 500%. Do you know what I mean? Like, what is it? This is still signifying a huge problem here that needs to be dealt with. But instead, they just go looking for some. It all comes back down to, what were you wearing? What were you drinking? Why did you go home with him, or whatever it is? You know what I mean? It's just a way to bring the attention on not supporting the woman at the end of the day.
Yeah, so the next bit is where they're going to clip this and call me like a Nazi bitch. And that is because the statistics say, and this is like from our government, not some right-wing whatever who did their own study. It says 50% of these group rapes were committed by migrants, and our population is 15% migrant. And the most common nationality is Syrian, Afghan, Iraqi, and Turkish. And the Turkish have been high up in that statistic for a long time. Like, people know there's a big Turkish population in Germany, and we've had the issue mostly of Turkish women being abused by Turkish men that we've not wanted to talk about for a long time. But now it's like, yeah, those are the biggest groups now. And when it comes to the victims, 50% of victims and the perpetrator, they're strangers to each other. So it's not like somebody being abused in a friendship setting or a family. This really is like taking someone off the street or at a party, they don't know each other, those kinds of settings. And also very concerning, and I'll later share some where I saw, unfortunately, some of this firsthand, the age of perpetrators is very young. And this is actually, so the overrepresentation of migrant men, especially from Muslim majority countries, is big in all sexual crimes, but it's especially high in gang rape, and also unusual in gang rape. The age is so low, 20% of perpetrators are between 14 and 18. So these are underage boys. And this is twice as much as in other so-called sex crimes or sexual violence. And
is this something that is still relegated to the bad right-wing people that are acknowledging the statistics, or is your country at the point now where it has to see the writing on the wall, it has to deal with these things? Have the laws surrounding the protection of women changed? Do you think that if that had happened to you today, that things would be different, that something more would happen than him just receiving a letter and then just being left alone to stalk you for 8 years?
Well, in my particular case, I do think so. And that's because one of my friends is being stalked right now. In this case, it's a German guy. And the police take it very seriously. And they did actually show up at his door, and they're like, you're this close to actually being dragged in front of a court. So I can't say if that's how they always handle it. This is just one case
Mhm.
happening close to me right now
Mhm.
that gives me hope,
Mhm.
but I don't know. I don't know if it would be different if he was a different ethnicity. I'm sure there's also racial profiling. Like I can hold both in I
Of
can
course.
believe that racial profiling is a real issue and that there is a problem with misogyny in those specific groups. Like those things don't contradict for me. So like some people critique these stats and they say, well, that's because those guys because the police takes it more seriously. Maybe in some cases they do. But of course they should
Mm.
treat all victims equally. But the opposite can be the case as well. And in the case of Cologne, we really saw like suppression of information and
Yeah.
delayed action. And I think the local police chief had to step down. So thankfully there were some consequences. But I was trying to Google grooming gang and I was just struggling to find information. And the only reason that we have these gang rape statistics is because the alternative for Germany, the ultra right wing, who are to me misogynist and I would never vote for them, they had like a freedom of information request. That's why we know those statistics. So unfortunately, it's slowly moving that there's more like Labor or Greens or whatever. They're always talking about deportation. A lot of those guys have citizenship now. Like
Mm.
first of all, I don't feel like deportation is enough. Like we have to go more to the root of things. But also, what do you do if someone's a citizen? Do you just lock them up for life? But we don't do that. We don't do that to gang rapists. They get 3 years. So
Mm.
I found like I wanted to make this point that I think my assessment, and I'm not deep in this because I've shied away from it, for all the concerns I stated at the start, that there's acceptable explanations for these statistics and unacceptable ones in the public, and you're allowed to say this is because these guys are male. Yeah, like you're allowed to say, okay, men, we have violence problems with men, and they're young. A lot of the asylum seekers are young. This the only people, they're more likely to make the granted often perilous journey, and they're disenfranchised, so they're frustrated. But I don't. This explanation to me is not enough. Like I said, like with Lundy Bancroft, okay, you can be disenfranchised. That's not immediately going to make you a gang rapist. Like
No,
there
of
has to
course
be
not.
misogyny in the mix, and that's the part that's not acceptable to say. And I've even some feminists who do generally support me and like we're all against like religious veiling, etc. And but but like even then I see people get really uncomfortable, even other women where we support each other like on almost everything. It's still like they're like, but if you disenfranchised a bunch of German men, they'd be exactly the same. Or Swedish, Icelandic, Polish, British, they'd be exactly the same. Like, you really want to tell me it makes no difference to the view of women of a guy whether he's in a country where FGM is normal or it's not normal, veiling is normal or it's not normal, women in the public eye and positions of power are normal or not. You're telling me it makes no difference. The moment his ego's hurt, he's just at risk of joining a grooming gang. Like, I'm not satisfied with that explanation. And especially when I hear from women who've grown up in cultures like that, I would feel like I still consider myself lucky to be German. And as a feminist, I really, really know how fucked up a lot of our laws are and how much violence there is. In my understanding, is really every third German woman has been raped. This is still a rape
Mm.
culture. I have no doubt
Mm.
about that. But can I see that it is worse and you can be more medieval or whatever, and that we have to name this and we have to name how mosques aided and how the specific religious writings aided and I'm sure some of it is complex and multifactorial and I'm not perfectly situated or know everything. That's kind of I was stressing about is do I even know enough to speak publicly? Like I feel like I have to like
Yeah,
do
you
Islamic
do.
studies for 10 years before I'm allowed to
No,
speak.
you don't. You very much get it. And really what it comes down to is that if it were any other group of people where we were seeing this kind of violence against women with these numbers, we would be able to have the conversation. That's what it comes down to. We would be able to look at these statistics. You wouldn't just need the the whatever this group that you were talking about, the neo-Nazis or whatever they were, who are need to bring the statistics for you. This would be mainstream. Everybody would be concerned about it. This is something that we have to deal with, right? But when it comes from Muslims, it becomes like Voldemort, right?
Mm-hmm.
The religion that cannot be named. And then that's exactly how they get more and more empowered because they are protected, because everybody around them is too afraid to speak up about it. So we're going to talk about grooming gangs in Germany in a moment, which we don't hear a lot about. We've heard a lot about the grooming gangs all over the UK, but it took a long time before we were finally able to hear about them. Anybody
Yep.
that spoke up was demonized as a white supremacist. People lost their jobs, whether they were politicians, journalists, all sorts of people were being demonized because they're the ones, feminists are being demonized because they're the ones that are trying to speak up for the victims. We're trying to speak up for victimized girls, and you turn out to be the bad guy because you're saying the perpetrators are Pakistani men. It's just the truth, but
Yep.
speaking the truth, and then that is what creates this culture of silence that allows them to continue to feel empowered because they're protected by this silence, right?
Yeah. And I just feel like I need to have a degree in Islamic studies and women's studies and a bodyguard. And otherwise, like if I speak out, I'll just get bulldozed. So
Yeah. But
yeah.
you really have to. You really have to just continue speaking out. I'm proud of you for doing that. I encourage everybody who's listening to this to use the freedoms that you are given in your free country. So many of us are coming from societies where men are allowed to do this to women, that pedophilia is institutionalized, right? Raping your wife is perfectly acceptable. Beating your wife is perfectly acceptable. Taking women and using them as sex slaves is perfectly acceptable. And so you can't even use your voice in those societies because what are you speaking up against? This is normal life. So when you're here in the West and you have your freedoms, and it's like this is the only place where we can fight back against those ideas. And if you choose not to out of fear, then you are just basically, lambs to the slaughter. You're just allowing yourself to be lambs to the slaughter at that point. You have to use the freedoms that you have. So I'm proud of you for speaking up today. I understand, of course, that you have to change your name and your appearance and your voice and everything because of the dangers, but I still applaud you for speaking up and for talking about these very important topics. I recommended to you a book called Pray with an E, written by Ayaan Hirsi Ali, where she talks about Germany, but she also talks about many other places all around Europe and in North America as well, where this phenomenon is happening, right? We're seeing this all over. Nobody wants to identify it. Nobody wants to acknowledge it. Everybody is so concerned about protecting the perpetrators that they are throwing the victims under the bus. So maybe if you read that book, it will allow you to feel a little bit more like you're armed with some more information because she actually takes it to the scriptures. She brings it back to the source of what these boys are being taught, these young boys, what they're being taught for them to be that demonic at such a young age. So let's talk about this grooming gang in Germany. You have a minor friend of yours who fell victim to a grooming gang. Can you please tell us about that?
Yeah. So when I was a teenager, like in my last years of high school, and then um so also like this overlaps with my own experience, but somehow I didn't see all the connections between them. Um I had a friend who had previous trauma, and no one knows for sure, but this is how it usually is. And what I'm about to share is not just about her. There was a group of girls that she was hanging out with. So this is like a collection of their stories. And so she's a couple years younger than me. So I was kind of like an older sister, younger sister dynamic. And eventually, like, the adults told us, it's like there are multiple issues here, including just very regular victim blaming, where I kept getting this message from the adults that kept saying, she's troubled, she's troubled. So, and if she's like aggressive or weird, just so you know, she has mental health issues. And now looking back, knowing what much more, I'm like, she was just deeply, deeply traumatized. And it's not clear who the first abuser was, but she was so traumatized that she struggled in school, and a lot of like ordinary social circles didn't accept her. And just to say, I only saw her sporadically. Some of this also happened when I had already moved away, so I wasn't there the whole time. And so I got snippets of views into her life because she noticed me just becoming a feminist, and she actually was interested in that. And then she would share what was happening to, like, essentially she and a group of girls who all had previous trauma. They would kind of hang around in town, and so they would meet the boys that weren't in school or weren't doing well. And most of those happened to be, or I don't know if happened to you, but they were, in this case, mostly Afghans, but I don't think exclusively, also Moroccan and other nationalities. But this wasn't just like young people hanging out together. I mean, I know this is not unusual. Everyone in the scenario could be German. I've heard this from other girls with similar life stories, where if you're very deeply traumatized, it's kind of these families, they're like, do we put this traumatized girl in a psychiatric hospital and keep her locked up, which is cruel and re-traumatizing, or do we let her kind of run free and just try to monitor a bit and give a bit of therapy and hope for the best? And that's what a lot of those families went with. I don't know if some of those girls I think didn't get any therapy, but my friend, her family really tried. But this group of men and boys, it included adult men. And once or twice, like she and I, when we met up, we would just go for walks. And once or twice I did meet some of these men. And she started dating someone and calling him her boyfriend. And I met him once, like on a park. And she said she was like 14, 15, he was 20. So that's already, to me, that's already just a child abuser. Like, that's not an appropriate age difference, in my opinion. But he didn't look 20. He looked older. And I don't know this for sure. It's a bit speculative, but you hear that there are Afghan men who destroy their papers and lie about their age. It's possible. I don't know this for sure. I know that trauma can age somebody. It is possible that he went through something and so he looked older. I could be wrong. But either way, he's a pedophile to me anyway. But he could have been significantly older. And he also just he did have a terrible vibe to me. But at that point, she was already telling me things that she, again, couldn't name as violence at the time. And I was trying to sort of help her see, like, it's not acceptable to pressure someone into sex. It's not acceptable. You say you don't want that sex act. He cannot insist on it. And this was happening to multiple girls. And I could kind of see, also, like, we followed each other on social media. I could see that this is my assessment. I don't know if I wasn't there for all of it. So I could be wrong about some of these details. I just want to say, but my assessment was that there was a lot of just trying to mold yourself in whatever these boys or men wanted from you. And the more harmless stuff is, okay, you listen to the same Arab music. That's fine. I like some Arab music. And it's not wrong to take an interest in what your partner wants, but I felt like these girls were losing their personality. They would just use the same language, the same music. That's not that unusual for a young girl, but where it becomes concerning, periodically some of them would sport hijab. And there was again talk about Islamic marriage. I don't know if some of these guys thought that they would, if they actually properly got married, they would get like a better shot at German citizenship. That's speculative. I don't know, but a lot of these guys were having fake relationships. And I could see just the girls trying, they felt they had to be really sexy. This is like this is a global problem. Girls think if I'm just beautiful enough and sexy enough, I will be loved. I will have this loving nuclear family. But the guys, they just want to sexually use somebody. But I could kind of see like sometimes it's very sexy, sometimes it's very like with the hijab. So they were like trying to be sexy and pious at the same time, like the worst of both worlds. And yeah, I would just hear very disturbing stuff about the kind of sexual culture, including like organized parties where girls were being abused. And I do know that this one specific Afghan man, he was making so-called child pornography and sharing that with other men. And I got a really like the closest I ever came to experiencing it is like I never went to any of those parties. I was actually trying to like tell the girls this is not good. You should. I was also not a trained social worker or therapist, so I didn't know what to say or what to do. I was sometimes talking to the adults saying, I'm worried. They would say, yeah, but these girls offer themselves. Like, what should we do? Lock them up? Like, we can't lock them up.
That's some of the thing they would say about the British girls, because they were usually girls from foster homes or something, and they'd be like, oh, well, that's just what they're like. That's what the cops would say, too.
Also, age of consent in Germany is 14. So this is technically not a crime. So if the girl isn't there saying, I want to go to court, it's not happening. Child pornography is actually also not completely illegal. Some level of possession, I think, isn't illegal. Again, you need to be a legal scholar to know that for sure. But anyway, I was like there sporadically trying to talk to the girls. And the closest I ever came to experiencing some of that head on was one time when, again, we would just go for walks, and we were on one of those walks. So I was like 19 and they were like 15, 16, and just chatting about pop music or whatever. I'd also try to I wasn't always trying to, first of all, I didn't come to them, say, tell me your trauma. They said that to me because they felt safe with me. And I didn't try to pry or any of that. So we were just talking about something else, and a group of boys and men came up after us and started shouting things. And when they came close enough to understand, they were saying, I will fuck you in the ass. And that included boys that were like, to me, tiny, like 12, like to me, not even pubescent. And so I got like the tiniest dose of what those girls were going through. And this was also close to a building where a lot of these men lived. So I'm not speculating if I say they're from the same like group of people. And I don't know this 100%, but knowing the patterns with these kind of like child pornography crimes, when men make videos like that of children or adult women, they share them with all their best buddies. And so everyone knows this girl is a whore. In their mind, they're not, of course, but in their mind, these girls are worthless. And so I got a little bit of a sense. And at the time, I didn't even realize that was criminal because, again, we weren't physically assaulted, only verbally. And so at the time, still, I was like, is this even illegal? Can I talk? Now I would be like, we're going straight to the police. If you guys don't want to talk to them, I will do all the talking. But I don't even know if you'd get sentenced for that. There was no witnesses. Just us. I don't know what would have happened, but we didn't go to the police. And with that and other crimes, one of the girls in that group did end up getting gang raped, and that included underage boys. And they sentenced some of the adult men. So that was the only court case I'm aware of that in that whole context ever happened, that gang rape. They sentenced the adult men, but they let the underage boys. And I don't know if the boys were just watching or just filming or just masturbating. I don't know. But they were implicated in the case and they let them go. So when that victim, if she would walk into town, she could meet one of those boys. So they take that public space away from the victims. And so I'm like, with what happened to me, I'm still a bit scared of the stalker, but I don't have nightmares anymore. But I know a lot of those girls, they're just traumatized for life. And they're just, I'm not privy to the treatment plan of every single one of the girls I met in that context. But from what I know, the go-to thing is to medicate them, heavily medicate them, anti-anxiety, antipsychotic. And and I'm not really hearing like this is PTSD. Everything the girls do makes sense from a PTSD point of view. I don't think they're borderline. I mean, I know this is a whole debate, and I'm not a psychologist. I don't have that training, and I could be wrong, but I was like, if all those things happened to me, I would have raging PTSD, and I would probably have some behaviors that other people would say are like antisocial or odd or whatever. So I know there was like, or the one I was still in touch with until 1 or 2 years ago was acutely suicidal last time I saw her. So those girls have not. I don't know about all of them, but like how will you recover if those guys are still running around and the others are out of prison now? I'm sure the ones that even never made it into prison. And I don't even know if people in my town know that this happened. I'm not sure if it stopped, if anyone like aged out of like. And then I was dealing with my own stuff. I had health issues. I was living in a new town. And I wasn't qualified to do anything about the situation, but I felt quite let down by the adults. I know some of them tried things, and I wasn't privy to every single situation or therapy plan or whatever, and nor was I qualified. But I felt like we only know how to imprison girls or essentially deliver them to predators, and we don't know how to do much else.
That's well said. I mean, I can't even find any kind of silver lining in anything that you've shared with us. I just feel like, in summary, the girls of Germany, the more vulnerable ones, the more in danger they are, of course, are just being fed to the wolves. It's just complete darkness and bleakness that I'm feeling right now. So I usually try to, with all my, like, that's all I ever do is try to find some sort of bright light to focus on. And I can't even find a bright light right now. Like, it's just too much. Let's open it up to the group. Sarah, please go ahead.
I'm sending you lots of hugs, Yasmine. Lots and lots of hugs. I love you so much. Hi, Richardis. Thank you for doing this. I really appreciate it. I know Yasmine appreciates it. I know all the little Muslim girls around the world appreciate it because they don't have a voice. I come from Iran. I'm an ex-Muslim. I had to live this horrible life that you are experiencing. And I came here to Canada and I thought I would be safe here. I would belong. They would listen to me. They would not silence me. And they told me in no uncertain terms that my story doesn't matter. I don't matter. I'm not real. I don't exist at all. And Yasmine gave me the voice. Yasmine made me speak up again and made me realize that it actually matters when I speak up. So I'm going just to reiterate what Yasmine said, that it matters. You don't need a degree in anything. You had this experience firsthand. You have compassion. It doesn't even matter if you didn't have the experience firsthand. You have a voice. And every time you speak up, you give me courage. You give another woman courage. You give somebody who was a victim, who was a witness, courage to speak up. So it matters. It matters that you speak up. And I really, really appreciate you. I know how painful it is to go through that trauma and to talk about it and to share it. So much love and so many hugs for you. I don't know how to express how appreciative I am right now. You talked about how you're afraid of the backlash. And I understand that. I get death threats on a daily basis on Twitter, Instagram, doesn't matter. Anywhere on social media, we get that. I get that. I want to know what would happen if you come out with your real name, with your real face. How would they react? Because you live in a small town and you would get recognized. So I talked to Yasmine. I talked with Yasmine about how I'm using my own real name. Should I use my own real name? Or like we had an in-depth risk assessment about how dangerous it might be for me and my family to use my real name when I talk or send emails or work or do things. Because I'm an ex-Muslim, because we are being vocal about it. I want to know what would happen to you. Can you describe this, paint us a picture? What do you think would happen? How far would they take this? And would you have any way of, I don't know, protecting yourself? Would the law stand with you in your country where you are right now? And again, thank you. So much love.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So first of all, I want to say I love this podcast and Yasmine's work. I listen to every single episode, and I share this podcast with everyone that is willing to talk about these issues. And I know, like, there's not even enough words for all the women who speak out despite the death threats, including when they come from your own family. Like, there's no words for that. And I should say, like, yeah, this is my first time speaking in such detail publicly about these things. And so I haven't given it deep thought. I spend a lot of time thinking, yeah, but what happened to me isn't that bad. Because I wasn't raped. I was just like almost raped and held in an apartment against my will. So that's, yeah. And so actually, like Yasmine asking me if I would speak about it, like even helped me get to the point where I'm like, okay, maybe it does matter. Maybe I do have something to say. Maybe it is important enough. So I haven't gone through a detailed risk assessment or what that could look like. And I feel like there might be people I could speak to. I do have a little bit of context in the ex-Muslim German scene where I could just go and ask, or like other critics. Like I mentioned, so I did once meet Alice Schwarzer. And I know there's women around her who are speaking out about this. So that's where I could start. But I'm like at the very beginning of thinking about this and what it might look like. And I'm also working very, very hard on other issues so most of my activism is not on things that impact me so directly, because I feel like I can handle that better emotionally. I still get triggered when I get victim blamed. So I feel like maybe, frankly, I need more therapy also if I do this more often or with like a bigger potential audience. So yeah, I can't answer that yet because I'm at a different stage. Yeah.
I really appreciate it. Just wanted to let you know that this is absolutely completely normal, because for the longest time I would say, I don't have anything to say. Why do you want to talk? Like, Yasmine, I don't have anything to say. This is normal. And she would just shake me and say, no, it's just normalized violence. And I think it's the same thing you went through. Is so normalized that we don't see it as violence. We don't see it as worthy of talking about. It was violence. And I'm sorry you had to go through it. I'm sorry that you didn't have the right kind of protection. I appreciate that you're doing this right now. Thank you. And thank you for your honest answer. I appreciate it. Thank you, Yasmine.
Thank you, Sarah. Okay, I'm going to read you one of the questions here from the chat. Somebody wants me to read it out to you. She says, "Hi, Richardis. Thank you so much for speaking out. In your opinion, are German women in your age group aware of the danger posed by misogynist Muslim men? Do you think they know, but they don't dare to name it, or are they oblivious to this danger?"
Oh, that's a tough question. So I only took a short peek at this. There's some research into public opinions, and the image of Germans overall has definitely gone more negative in recent years towards Islam. And it's frustrating because this does also impact people who absolutely don't deserve it. Like, again, I don't find a contradiction to say we do have a problem with, I think, increased violence against women. And we also have irrational racist attacks on people who just look not white European. So those statistics have also gone up.
And sometimes one can inform the other.
yeah, like for example, like my stalker felt antagonized, like he was in a like more backward part of Germany where I'm sure he like when he was telling me he would get like looks or people like muttering things under their breath. Like I'm not sure he made that, he might have, but I that could be true. And then he feels emboldened in his victim status, but this doesn't justify anything he's doing to me or others. So, but what was the other part of the question? Yeah, what do young women think? I haven't looked at the stats like broken down for young women, so I can only speak to women I know, and it varies widely. So I do know a number of women who've had bad experiences like myself, um, who are then like, I would never, or who've heard that reports from others and take that very seriously, especially in the feminist space. I do tend to find, well, there's multiple feminist movements. I'm obviously in the groups where we're not pro-Islam and like putting the hijab on World Hijab Day, like where we wanted in one town I lived, we wanted to do a protest where in solidarity with women in Iran to like be in a public plaza and take off, like put scarves on, but take them off in like a big group of women, and the city wouldn't allow us. So yeah, no surprise there. So I hang out with those women, so I probably have a biased sample of women who are like, I don't. I also know like women from like Latin America. They're like, yeah, the Christian men, we don't want them either. So, but this is my biased sample where we're like mostly atheists or like maybe like spiritual, but in a feminist sense. So we wouldn't mess with, and to us, we would at least be like, yeah, what kind of Muslim? Like, let me look closer. But I have other friends who are still like kind of like, what's the right adjective?
Oblivious.
Yeah, and I also have friends. I I have, and I don't want to shame her because I feel like that's just her experience. I have one friend say she prefers Muslim men because they're more romantic. And but then she tells me the guys she keep like the German men, they're all like hook up and like they don't want to commit, and the Muslim men. But then they're also talking to her about getting married at the mosque. And not all of these guys are terrible groomers and abusers. They're worried about going to hell. Like she's told me she had boyfriends who that were worried about going to hell for having premarital sex. And I feel for those men. I feel like that hurts men too, that those ideas. I don't think that they were all abusers, but some of them were. And there was a lot of like, should you really wear this in the summer? Like that kind of level of, that's still misogynistic to me or problematic, and more could be hiding underneath. Yeah, so I don't have a perfect sample of what young women think. I'm not entirely sure, but that's just the people I'm around.
I just want to take this moment to talk a little bit about what you just said there, because my inbox is always full of stories from women that are telling me about this really cute Muslim guy that they met. And he seemed really open-minded, and yeah, he was Muslim, but he was one of the liberal ones. We have a phrase for these, for this scenario. We call it "not my Muhammad." So when she always looks at her Muhammad,
oh yeah,
and she's like, "No, not my Muhammad. He's not like that. My Muhammad is sweet. My Muhammad is romantic. My Muhammad is this and that." And yes, he will seem that way in the beginning. And it always ends up with that analogy of the frog, the slow boil, right? Before you know it, this guy that you thought it was so cute, the way he was protective of you, then you start to realize, oh, wow, that's actually really controlling. You know, the jealousy that you thought was like flattering, you realize how possessive he is, right? It's step by step.
And like, even if he's not acutely intentionally abusive, you can have a relationship with someone who says you cannot have male friends. So that happened repeatedly, where there's like, you cannot have a male friend. Your friend is coming to town, you're meeting him alone. And like, for us, like, if you have a good relationship with a male friend, he can sleep over at your place. You're not going to have sex. He's not going to harass you, because that's a real, genuine, eye-level friendship. And, but that's like, there's a lot of like those men their brains would explode at the idea that that's possible. So
yeah, And I need girls to be more aware of this. So I have a couple of people that are going to be coming on this podcast that are going to be coming and sharing their story of being really just, shedding light on how slowly this can happen. And the guy that you think is so great, before you know it, you find yourself stuck in this power and control dynamic. I'll let Mars go next, and then I've got another question from Claire. Mars, go ahead.
Thank you, Yasmine. Well, I have a question, but let me begin by first saying, Richardis, I'm truly sorry to hear about your story. It reminded me keenly of the time I read through Yasmine's book. I had to put her down several times because I had a really hard time getting through it.
Yeah, same for me.
Yes. The question I have is, this is actually an area that I'm shamefully ignorant of. And I remember reading through Ayaan Hirsi Ali's book, Pray, several years ago when it first came out. I wanted to understand more about the idea behind Muslim grooming gangs and the misogyny in that religion. I had to take a quick step out previously, so if this question was already addressed in the interview, please jump over it. But the question I have for the both of you is, what is it in the theology that results in these kind of grooming grams? Like the incident in Germany, the Taharosh Jamal. It from what I understand, this was a shock to people living in Western countries, but in Muslim majority countries, if I'm not mistaken, this is common. And you hear these stories all the time about Muslim men wanting to dress their women up in burqas so they don't draw the attention of men. But this seems to be highly contradictory to what they claim they desire. Can you?
Well,
I'm sorry.
They don't see it. Sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead, Mars. I thought you were done.
No, I'm aware of verses in the Quran like Surah 434 and the issues that Islam has with female gender mutilation, but like I don't understand, like how does the religious aspects of Islam justify this kind of behavior? I don't understand it.
So first of all, let's go back to the reason for wearing hijab in the very beginning was so that you would be recognized as a Muslim woman. And when you're wearing a hijab, you are not to be raped. It's basically saying these are the covered women, don't rape them. The uncovered women, the non-Muslim women, they are, free for all. So there is that hierarchy between Muslim women and non-Muslim women. They do view non-Muslim women as just filthy whores that are walking around half naked, they don't care. They're just like animals. And that's the cultural normalized, that's how they view non-Muslim women. And so when you talk about it being a contradiction that they want their women to be wearing burqas or hijabs, no, it's not a contradiction to them because they're saying, well, ours need to be covered up so that they are protected from the rapists. But the ones that are not covered up, they want it because they know that if they covered themselves up, then they wouldn't be raped. But they're choosing not to cover themselves up. So clearly they're asking for it. And so what you're seeing with the Taharush, and this started to become popularized in Tahrir Square during the Egyptian riots, because that's when it started to happen to Western women. It started to happen to journalists that were coming to talk about the revolution that was happening in Egypt. And that's why it became global news. I mean, when it happens to Egyptian women, nobody's hearing about it. But if an Egyptian woman is walking around without hijab, t-shirt and jeans, normal clothing, she's seen as somebody who's walking around going, here I am for anybody free for the taking. That's how they view women.
And also, I just want to add from my own experience. My stalker also was an enthusiastic porn consumer. He admitted that to me. And a lot of I know, like I mentioned, my friend was filmed when she was being abused. So porn is in the mix too. So if you already have the idea that an uncovered woman is, excuse me, a whore, and we believe that like prostituted women cannot be raped, they exist for sex and they can take it. That is then intensified if especially if the first time you've seen white women is in porn, and then you go to the country and like, yeah, this is what white women get up to. This might be a slight simplification. I don't know if this is true in every case, but I know this is in the mix too. Just yeah, I don't know if I'm phrasing this well.
No, you are. That is correct. So because they are such sexually repressed societies, they do consume porn to an inordinate degree. I think the number one country in the world that watches pornography is Pakistan. And that does allow them to dehumanize women even further. And so yeah, that does contribute to it. But even, Mars was asking me about the scriptural things. There's obviously lots of cultural elements as well. But if we go back to the religion, that's the religious justification there is hijab for Muslim women, no hijab for non-Muslim women. You've all heard of sex slaves. You've heard about what happened to the girls and women in Israel. You've heard about what happened to the girls and women, the Yazidis in Iraq, what happens to Hindu girls in Pakistan, these grooming gangs that you're talking about in the UK and in Germany. All of that is that idea that they have in their heads that they are allowed, according to their religion, to use non-Muslim women for sex. And those women don't even have the right to consent because they are essentially owned. They are slaves. And so they don't even have the dignity of giving consent.
I want to add one more thing. I read a study recently. This was about like fundamentalist Christian churches. So it's not unique to Islam, but it finds like an extreme expression in like the burqa, for instance, where this researcher essentially showed how these like local fundamentalist communities where women also are fairly covered up. You can see their face, but they're quite covered up. How it puts all the onus on her. It's not the man who has to control himself and just, if you attracted to someone, well, just keep that to yourself if it's not appropriate to express. And so the slightest, like any deviation from that, that like rule, like in the extreme cases with veiling would be some hair showing, or even in that Christian community, like women having a shorter skirt, the reaction is all the more extreme for the fact that it's hidden all the time. So in Germany, to me, it's normal. If it's hot outside, I'll wear shorts because it's warm and I don't want to suffer. And to me, that's normal. But if that's not normal in your culture, then just a woman, just her legs or her shoulders are all the more likely to be seen as an invitation and a marker of her impurity. So, yeah.
Yeah, and of course, what we're talking about is not unique to the Muslim community by any means. This happens globally, and like you said, this happens quite, probably more often in closed groups, like religious cults or more fundamentalist religious groups because of that, because it's a closed society and you're all trying to protect each other and the reputation of whatever religion it is that you follow. All of that is true. But the difference is that when you step outside of that cult bubble, if you're in America or if you're in Canada or if you're in Germany or if you're in any secular free country, then you should be able to find the support from law enforcement, government, etc. Whereas the same is not true for women in 57 countries across the planet. So the spectrum that matters, like, of course, this happens everywhere, but normalizing it, accepting it, not making it a criminal act, that matters. That is what's going to encourage it to happen more and more. Ira, are you ready to ask your question?
Hi.
Hi.
Yes. I was struck at the beginning. Oh, I was struck by the whole thing, and thank you for the courage to present this. And I was struck how you said no one will be surprised by this, meaning both the behavior of the Muslim and the behavior of society, and blaming the victim and calling it racist and Islamophobic. And looking for any explanation except to blame the perpetrator because the perpetrator was Muslim, or primarily because of that. And yes, maybe no one's surprised, but we're all shocked every time. And this is true on so many things. We're shocked, but not surprised. We predict this in our minds, and yet we don't really expect it to happen. We tell ourselves it's just our paranoia, or we don't want to make that affect our behavior, or things like that. I am shocked, but not surprised by the outburst of anti-Semitism after October 7th, and how it came to a mass level and to the surface. But for decades, I've been seeing the development of this as an ideology on the left. A deeply ingrained part of leftist ideology. So I shouldn't be shocked, but I am. I'm a non-observant Jew, an unbeliever, but yeah, I knew it should be coming. Parts of me predicted it. And the same thing on so many, many other things. I wonder why, and it's not as if I don't have answers, but I think there are two sets of answers. I wondered what other people's impressions are, and yours. One of them is these people are hypocrites. They don't understand. They choose the wrong value. Yes, they're defending Muslims against oppression, but they don't realize women need it more, or sometimes Jews need it more. And to me, I don't buy that, but it's a values issue. Or they're intersectional, and this is all part of their struggle against oppression, and this is their idea of how to do it, and they've got it wrong. And the other explanation is more strategic. They have an enemy. The enemy is the West. The enemy is anything they see as upholding the West. Their allies is anyone fighting against the West. And Islam, and especially militant Islam, is the most militant thing they can throw against the West. And so a French leftist is quoted as having converted to Islam for the reason that they're the ones who are doing it. I think it's probably obvious which one I think is the deeper explanation or the more accurate one, but I wondered other people's impressions. And yours.
Oh yeah, there's a lot there. I don't know if I can respond to every point of it, but I'm just thinking, so I have friends like all across the world, and I work internationally against violence against women, and I encounter in various countries people who just have a very deep hatred of the US, including a lot of US citizens. This doesn't justify it, but those people usually, not always. I mean, there's some people who are fake oppressed, but I have met a number of people who are deeply traumatized by ending up homeless in the US, and who see the like failing society, and then they go really, really left wing into Marxism, and then they end up with this like anything that's anti-American is good. And from a psychological perspective, I can almost understand it, but I like where I stopped like. So I think I was a little bit naive, because some of those people, I saw them posting Hamas are freedom fighters after October 7th. And like, that's when I was like, okay, I'm done. Like I can go quite far in like having some differences, and okay, you fear the US more than Russia. Okay, maybe so, but like that's where like there's no tolerance anymore. And I just felt so depressed because, like I said, like I'm not saying it's not hard, but I'm always trying to be like, okay, I see a threat on the right and I see a threat on the left, and I'm scared of Putin, and I know the US does that does systematic human rights violations. I don't think that's a conspiracy. But my enemy's friend is not my friend, and I mean, I don't feel super qualified to comment on lots of geopolitical stuff, but yeah, I also see that in leftist spaces where people just go so hard off the deep end. People who are like pretty lucid on other things, and some of them have personal trauma, which kind of explains it, though it doesn't excuse it. Others not so much. And the other thing I was going to mention. Now, when I speak like on social media about anything to do with Islam, I'll literally just post a critique of the veil. People will comment, "Can you say something about Palestine? Are you endorsing every single thing Netanyahu has ever done in his entire life?" And I know why are you posting this right now? And they are essentially saying, don't say anything about Islam until there's peace in the Middle East. That's their request. And I'm like, I'm just talking about violence against women. I'm not qualified to comment on every geopolitical, and they're like, oh, you're both siding this. How can you both side genocide? And yeah, then I feel like we can't talk about anything anymore because they've just decided I'm literally the devil again. So that really depresses me. Yeah.
Yeah, welcome to the club. All right, we've got a question from Claire here. Claire asks, if sexual education is taught in schools, I wonder if teachers could speak to respect the sexes, respect between the sexes, respectful communication, what is appropriate and not appropriate, to trust your instinct or gut or sixth sense on how you feel based on how others speak to you or treat you, and to educate regarding grooming gangs, dangers, and what girls need to do to protect themselves. So is any of that included in your sex ed?
No. I mean, we're lucky to even learn about contraception and STIs a little bit. I mean, that was when I was in school. I guess I should have to ask some like slightly younger people if it's gotten any better. But I know people who they're like volunteers. So we do have, like, it's not in the curriculum as far as I'm aware, but I do know people who go into schools and talk about healthy relationships, respect, how to catch red flags maybe sooner. But this is like, the school has to say this is a priority for us, and we're going to think about what's age appropriate, who are we going to get in to do that education. And then, well, I think a lot of that's sensible, and the people I know, I think what they're doing is sensible. I do know some people who go into schools specifically to talk about sexual exploitation, because people might know, like, prostitution is legal in Germany, and victims of that do tell us it's harder to speak out because of that, and it's also easier to get groomed if someone's saying, well, this is just a legitimate way to make money. So, like, not all grooming gangs lead you into prostitution, but they can. And I know some people who do this work, and I think it's very valuable. Then, unfortunately, you have to be, if you're a school and you want to prioritize this, you have to be very careful about who you're going to invite, because there's also people who are going to come in and say, porn is good for you. And you can be born in the wrong body. I don't know if I'm offending anyone with that, but I don't think you can be born in the wrong body. And I think it's dangerous to tell that to young kids. So those kinds of people are also doing that. So it's up to every individual school to go out there and say, what kind of program, what kind of people do we want to invite? And some of these might have state funding. And okay, maybe it is not the best idea to talk about talk about sex with your biology teacher. And a lot of these people who do those kinds of education with kids, they're a bit younger, and they're not the person you see every day, where maybe you'd be a bit uncomfortable talking about sex or anything like that. So I think it's good if somebody comes from outside, but you have to be so careful about who is going to come in, because they might also teach unscientific or dangerous things, in my opinion. Others might disagree.
I'll just say that in the UK, they tried to have, because of course the grooming gangs in the UK were a really big deal. It went on for decades. Girls as young as 7 and 8 years old were being pulled in, and when they tried to have education in the schools, they tried to create these little videos where they're like informing the kids of, how to spot these things and how to be careful and whatnot. Those, public service informational videos were deemed Islamophobic. So that's another thing you're going to have to deal with. If you try to fight against it, there will be others fighting in the opposite direction.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I have one anecdote that connects to this.
Mm-hmm.
And so actually, my brother was telling me that as part of the final curriculum, the graduation curriculum at a school, they had to write an essay about why it is racist to put anti-forced marriage campaigns, like flyers, posters, whatever, specifically in migrant majority parts of towns in Germany.
See, that's the moral relativism, the cultural relativism that just boils my blood.
And this was coming from an activist teacher. So I don't even know if that's in the curriculum. You have like rogue activist teachers thinking they're like saving the world. And I know a number of teachers who are saying like, we're really trying with like all the different kids from the different backgrounds, and we're worried about girls who might get married off, and we're worried how to interfere. And it starts smaller. It starts with and I don't always blame the individual parent, because they could be going through things. It doesn't always have to be that they just don't care about the girls, but from what I hear, that's part of it. Just like no support for any extracurricular activities. Like that's kind of where the neglect can start, or where some German teachers told me like, this is a red flag. Like when we do like school theater or school sports, like everyone shows up, but like where are a lot of the Muslim parents? They're not showing up for their girls and their activities, or they're even forbidding them sometimes. And
Yep.
and they're also trying, again, it's up to individual teachers to be like, what can we do against anti-Semitism? We hear from our students, there's a lot of anti-Semitism among the young students. That's gotten even worse, obviously, due to recent events, and they're all scrambling. And it's all about
In
like, who is your
Germany.
teacher? Yeah. And you just have to be lucky that you have a teacher who's looking out for you. And like whatever that is, who's looking out, are you very, like, are you showing signs of anything concerning? Does it seem like you have a support system? It's tough. And I mean, when I was in school, we were still getting sexually harassed by the teachers. From what I hear, that's gotten better, but this is like more anecdotal local schools. But like I would never gone to a teacher with anything, unfortunately. Yeah, there's so much going on there.
Yeah. There is a lot. There's a lot of, we've identified a lot of problems that we are talking specifically about German society, German schooling, German law enforcement, but unfortunately this is across the board, these stories are very familiar. I could tell you things from Canada that are just almost the exact same thing, and it's all incredibly disheartening, and it all stems from that word that was created by Islamists, which is Islamophobia. And that word is what's created this entire ecosystem that we're in right now, where everybody just bows to the whims of whatever it is that a Muslim person wants, regardless of how abusive or destructive or illegal it is, because they are too afraid to be called Islamophobic. So they would rather just throw whoever it is under the bus. And that can, that just varies across the board. When I say under the bus, it can mean anything from little things to, to these girls that are victims of these grooming gangs for so long with no protection and no support because the authorities were too afraid of that word.
Sorry, I forgot to mention this just quickly. A lot of these girls were white, but some of them had a migrant background. That doesn't make a difference though, because like for some reason, like migrant man trumps migrant girl. So just to affirm that in my experience. Yeah.
I think that's migrant Muslim man trumps
Yeah.
migrant
Oh,
Muslim girl.
yes.
Not a migrant Christian man, not a
Yeah.
migrant atheist.
Good point.
Yeah.
Muslim is at the top of the intersectional hierarchy because it is counted as the most anti-Western.
Yeah. Which is just obviously, we've spoken about this so many times on this podcast, but it just really makes you wonder, how they have any functioning brain cells when the same people that are going on about women's equality, LGBT equality, all of these things, and then they will at the same time support the religion that is most anti all of these things that they purport to support. So I don't know how that cognitive dissonance maintains in their head. I really don't know. It's pretty shocking to me, like people calling Hamas socialists. You know what I mean? And it's like is anti-colonialists. It's like, do you even have the first clue? Like, even if you didn't know that they were terrorists and that they raped women and that they kidnapped babies and that they murdered babies and all of the things that they did, like, you don't know anything about their ideology for you to think that they might be socialists and anti-colonialists. It's just absolutely mind-boggling stupidity.
Yasmine, if I may, it shocks, but it doesn't surprise me in the least. It is logical if they are strategic rather than value driven.
Yeah.
If the West is the enemy, they identify most with that which is most anti-Western to throw at it. If the goal is to destruct the biggest hierarchy in the world and to deconstruct all hierarchy supposedly, but the biggest hierarchy is Western predominance in the world, and to deconstruct it, they support every other hierarchy as a power to throw against it. The more malign, in some sense, the better. Does it contradict their ostensible values? Of course, but they are being consistent to their strategic goals, and they don't care that they're called hypocrites.
Mm-hmm.
They laugh at it because, in a sense, they aren't. But that depends on who they are and how clear they are in their own minds as to their strategic goal. Obviously, people who just look up to the far left and who are more liberal, the contradiction is more glaring in them. They don't seem to understand themselves. But plenty of people are quite strategic and clear in this, and their labeling makes sense in its own crazy, stupid way.
No, I agree with you. And it's also arrogance that they think that this strategy is going to work in their favor, because this has happened most famously in Iran, right? Where there was that alliance between the leftists and the Islamists. And we saw how that turned out, right? There was just a bloodbath of socialists and communists as soon as the Islamic regime of Iran took over. And this is just a repeat of history throughout the Middle East. There's this love affair between the left and Islamists, and the left never, ever, ever come out on top. But they keep on thinking that this is a good strategy, that the enemy of the enemy is their friend, when nope, the enemy of the enemy is most certainly your enemy too. But they're too stupid to realize it, and it's very, very frustrating. A friend of mine who went to Germany as a refugee, she's an atheist lesbian. She got so frustrated with speaking out about this that at one point she said to me, I cannot wait to see Germany ruled by Sharia. I cannot wait to see all these fuckers get exactly what they want. These are the people that they love and that they support and that they stand behind. Good. I'd love to see your country become a Sharia state. And I was just like, oh my God, like you are, like that was like shocking to me, because this was a long, long time ago. But now I can sort of see like her frustration. Imagine being a lesbian atheist woman escaping to the free West and then finding that the demons that you ran away from are the ones that are lauded in this country. Like it's such a betrayal. And Iranian people have spoken about that time and time again. We've heard Yazidis that, taking a bus in Germany or in Canada, and then they see their rapist there that was taken in as a refugee. I mean, the stories are endless. But anyway, I wanted to make sure that you got the last word, Richardis. I want to make sure that you share with us any words of wisdom, any advice, any place where we can find you. Whatever it is, I want to just allow you the conclusion of the podcast.
I should have had something good prepared. Yeah, it's like you said, it's pretty scary. It feels hopeless at times because we're not even taking the first step. I don't know what step 10 is, but step 1 is having the conversation, and we're barely having that. Barely. And yeah, that is so hard to deal with. Like any type of feminist work is hard. I do work on really hard issues, but I feel like something is happening, something is moving, something is getting better, or at least some people are getting it, and not everyone is calling me insane or bigoted the whole time. And if I was facing that full on all the time, I don't know how I could keep that up. So I just have the biggest possible respect for all the women who do, especially when it touches on your personal trauma. I've just avoided that, but I want to say thank you again, because it helps me feel less crazy and feel like this is not like an irrelevant mishap or whatever. And like rationally, I know what happened to me is really serious. And if my friend told me this happened to her, I would be so mad on her behalf. But like I still have moments where I doubt whether what happened to me matters. And you inviting me helps with that. Like, because sometimes you need to hear it from other people that it does. Because the voices of doubt are so big. And it also helped me like really realize most women don't want to be victims and don't like the label. And we're worried if others see us as victims, they see us as stupid and potentially easy prey again. Too traumatized to speak, of course. But yeah, I really just want to rattle the left to finally start speaking out, not just about Muslim, and I know other minority abusers who you cannot speak about it. So I know multiple women, their abuser is someone who identifies as trans. And that's another one who's at the top of the oppression hierarchy. Again, no contradiction to me to say, I know there's discrimination or violence against people who identify as trans, but there's also people abusing that label, and there's just abusive people with that identity. And it cannot be that women are losing their entire social group for saying that. Like, so, I mean, I'm here to speak about when the perpetrator is a Muslim specifically. Like, no matter how downtrodden, if maybe he literally escaped war, I don't care. It should not be lenient before court. Like, that's another thing. The German court system, if someone tells a sob story, like his grandma died, his dog died, he fled war, how is that relevant? I don't care. It's completely irrelevant to the crime. So that's the thing that we have to arrive at in Germany. It's acceptable to talk about any perpetrator, and it's acceptable to at least ask the question, did his religion, ideology, whatever contribute? Did he use that as a grooming tool to say, I'm so oppressed, I couldn't possibly be an abuser, right? That kind of wolf in sheep's clothing thing that I think in left-wing spaces, unfortunately, but not just there, happens all the time. Like having the conversation and looking at how our legal system is contributing. And then I'm sure there's many, many, many more issues attached to this where I don't really have any of the answers, but it starts with a conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, it absolutely does. You're absolutely correct. And thank you so much for coming here and having this conversation with us, for having the bravery to come and share with us your story. Your story does matter. You do matter. You know, it breaks my heart that you would even think that or feel that, but I cannot tell you how often women feel that way. We diminish ourselves so much and it just breaks my heart. And so I'm really, really grateful that you feel seen and heard today. And I hope that you feel like this community is your community and that you can be here and you can share your story and you can express yourself and you will be supported and you will be protected. And nobody here you spent a lot of time in the conversation today doing a lot of, I couldn't possibly know everything and there might be other things. And obviously it's not all this and that, like you don't really have to do all that. You don't have to put all of those caveats in place. You can just tell your story and express your truth just straight from the heart, because your story matters and how you experienced it matters and how you feel matters and everything that you went through matters. And you don't have to think about him and his experiences and his trauma. Fuck him. It's irrelevant. It doesn't matter, right? This is your story and you're telling your side of the story. And you're the one who matters to us. And we're very grateful to you for coming here today. Thank you, Richardis.
Thank you so much.
And thank you everyone for joining us here. I hope I didn't miss any more questions. There's 16 new messages that I haven't read. So hopefully there weren't any more questions for Richardis. But if they were, you can just email them to me and I'll forward them on to her. And this might be a good opportunity for me to tell you guys that I'm planning on starting a community where we can all continue the conversation with the guests after the podcast is over. And then that community can just continue to grow and grow and grow because the conversations that happen in the chat and that happen in my email afterwards with people asking me to connect them with this person and that person is just, it has led me to believe that we need a place for us to all continue these conversations and to find each other. So obviously Richardis will be invited into that community and you can speak to her directly. But in the meantime, feel free to send your question to me and I'll forward it on to her. And sorry if I missed anybody, but it's been really wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone. And I'll see you next time.